The ivory cardstock felt heavier than it should have in Sarah Mitchell's weathered hands. 5 years. It had been 5 long years since the last Mitchell family reunion, and here was the gilded invitation, delivered to her modest duplex in Cedar Falls like an unwelcome ghost from the past. The cursive lettering announced Bob's annual gathering at his sprawling suburban home, complete with the usual promises of catching up and celebrating family bonds. Sarah glanced across the small living room where Danny sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, his 22-year-old frame folded over a thick programming manual he'd checked out from the public library. His sandy hair fell across his forehead as he traced lines of code with his finger, lips moving silently as he absorbed each concept. To most people, Danny appeared exactly as he always had, quiet, awkward, lost in his own world. But Sarah saw something different in her son these days. There was a stillness to him now, a kind of focused energy that hadn't been there during those painful teenage years. "Danny, honey," she called softly, knowing better than to startle him when he was deep in concentration. He looked up, blinking eye-like behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Yes, Mom. We got an invitation to Uncle Bob's reunion." "Do you? Would you want to go this year?" Danny's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight tensing of his shoulders. The last reunion had been brutal. Michael had just gotten into Harvard, Jessica was starting law school, and the entire evening had devolved into a showcase of their achievements while Danny sat silent in the corner, enduring pointed questions about his plans and thinly veiled suggestions about vocational training. "I think I'd like to go," Danny said finally, his voice carrying that same measured quality it always had. "I have something I'd like to share with everyone." Sarah's heart clenched. She'd spent years shielding Danny from his family's well-meaning but crushing expectations, watching him retreat further into himself after each gathering. But something in his tone made her pause. There was a quiet confidence there, something she hadn't heard before. "Are you sure, sweetheart? You know how they can be." Danny closed the book gently and met her eyes. For a moment, she saw not her vulnerable son, but a young man who had traveled a long journey in silence. "I'm sure, Mom. I think it's time." The drive to Bob's house in Westchester Hills took them through neighborhoods that grew progressively more manicured, the lawns greener, the cars newer. Sarah's 10-year-old Honda felt conspicuous among the BMWs and Mercedes lining her brother's driveway. She parked at the far end, already feeling the familiar knot of inadequacy forming in her stomach. Bob Mitchell had always been the golden child. Even as kids, he'd possessed an effortless charisma that opened doors and drew people to him. His success in commercial real estate had surprised no one, nor had his marriage to Patricia, a former debutante whose family owned half of downtown Cedar Rapids. Their son Michael was everything the Mitchell family valued: articulate, ambitious, conventionally handsome, and now studying economics at Harvard. Linda, Sarah's older sister, had taken a different but equally impressive path. Dr. Linda Chin Mitchell ran the cardiac surgery unit at Regional Medical Center, her life a testament to discipline and excellence. Her daughter Jessica had inherited those same traits, graduating summa cum laude before diving straight into corporate law. And then there was Sarah, the middle child, the teacher, the single mother whose ex-husband had vanished when Danny's differences became apparent. She'd built a quiet life centered around her son's needs, but family gatherings always made her feel like she was still that overlooked teenager watching from the sidelines. Danny had been 7 when the family first noticed his differences. The way he'd cover his ears at loud noises, his intense focus on specific topics, his difficulty with eye contact. The diagnosis of mild autism spectrum disorder had divided the family cleanly. Sarah embraced it as an explanation, while Bob and Linda worried it was an excuse. "You coddle him," Bob had said during one particularly heated Thanksgiving argument. "He needs structure," discipline. He'll never learn to function in the real world if you keep making allowances. Linda had been more clinical but no less hurtful. Early intervention is crucial. There are programs, facilities. He could learn valuable skills, become independent. What they'd never understood was that Danny was already independent in ways that mattered. He thought differently, yes, but Sarah had learned to see that difference as a gift rather than a deficit. Still, their words echoed in her head as she and Danny approached the front door of Bob's colonial mansion. Patricia's smile was as perfectly maintained as her landscaping. "Sarah, Danny, come in, come in. Everyone's on the back deck." Her eyes lingered on Danny for a moment, that familiar mixture of sympathy and uncertainty crossing her features. The backyard was a testament to Bob's success, a pool that sparkled like a jewel, perfectly arranged outdoor furniture, and a spread of catered food that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. The family had already gathered, drinks in hand, voices carrying that particular cadence of the comfortably affluent. Michael saw them first. At 21, he carried himself with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. His handshake was firm when Sarah introduced herself, but his greeting to Danny was perfunctory, barely concealing his discomfort. "Hey, Dan." Still working at the library. There was nothing overtly cruel in the question, but the undertone was clear. Still stuck in the same dead-end job? Jessica appeared at Michael's shoulder, elegant in a way that seemed effortless, but Sarah knew cost a fortune. "Danny, Mom told me you're doing so well there." "That's nice." The word nice hung in the air like a judgment. Sarah watched Danny's face, looking for signs of the hurt she knew these casual dismissals caused him. But he simply nodded, his expression serene. "I like the library," he said quietly. "It's a good place to learn things." Bob approached with his usual booming voice and back, slapping enthusiasm. "There's my nephew. Looking good, buddy. Patricia tells me you're still living at home? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Lots of young people are doing that these days." The subtext was deafening. Lots of failures are doing that these days. Linda joined the circle, her surgeon's eyes quickly assessing Danny as if looking for symptoms. "Danny, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Are you still seeing Dr. Morrison? It's so important to maintain those therapeutic relationships." Sarah felt her jaw clench. Linda meant well, but she had a gift for making Danny sound like a patient rather than a person. "He's doing great, Linda. Really great." "Of course he is," Linda said, but her smile was the kind reserved for terminal diagnoses, delivered gently. "We all just want the best for him." Danny's hand moved to his shirt pocket, fingers briefly touching something there before dropping back to his side. Sarah noticed the gesture but didn't think much of it. Danny had always been fidgety at family gatherings. Dinner was served on the screened porch, the table set with good china and crystal that caught the late afternoon light. Sarah found herself seated between Patricia and Linda, while Danny was relegated to the far end next to Michael and Jessica. The separation felt deliberate, as if the cousins were meant to represent the future while Danny remained firmly planted in the present. Bob tapped his wine glass with his knife, commanding attention with the ease of a man accustomed to holding the floor. "I just want to say how wonderful it is to have the whole family together again. We've got so much to celebrate this year." He launched into a recitation of achievements: Michael's internship with Goldman Sachs, Jessica's promotion to junior partner track, Bob's own expansion into commercial development in Des Moines. Each success was presented like a gift to the family, proof of their collective worth. "And speaking of success," Bob continued, his gaze drifting to Danny, "we haven't heard much about what our youngest generation member has been up to. Danny, still enjoying the library work?" The question was posed with such careful neutrality that it might as well have been an accusation. Danny set down his fork, his movements precise and measured. "Yes, I like working there. That's wonderful, honey, Patricia chimed in with that same brittle smile. It must be so peaceful. All those books. Michael cleared his throat. Actually, I wanted to ask Dan. What are your, long-term plans? Have you thought about going back to school? Trade school, maybe? The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Jessica joined in. My firm has connections with some excellent vocational programs. There's one that specializes in people with special needs. They have wonderful success rates for placement in food service and custodial work. The kindness in her voice made it worse. Sarah was about to explode when Linda added her own contribution. The important thing is realistic expectations. Danny has made so much progress, but we have to be practical about his limitations. Bob nodded sagely. Exactly. We all love Danny, but coddling him isn't doing him any favors. He needs to understand that the real world doesn't make accommodations. Danny's hand moved to his pocket again, but his expression remained calm. I understand the real world just fine. Michael laughed, the sound sharp and unexpected. Come on, Dan. You work part-time at a library and live with your mom. When I was your age, I already had 3 internships under my belt. When you were my age, Danny said quietly, you had a trust fund. The temperature on the porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. Michael's face flushed red, and Bob's jovial expression hardened. That's enough, Bob snapped. We've all worked hard for what we have. Maybe if you put in the same effort instead of hiding behind your condition, you might actually accomplish something. Sarah's chair scraped against the tile as she stood. How dare you? But Danny's voice cut through the rising tension, calm as a lake before a storm. I think you should sit down, Mom. Please. The family dinner had devolved into something uglier than Sarah had experienced even during the worst of previous gatherings. Bob's mask of polite concern had slipped completely, revealing the frustration and disappointment that had been simmering for years. Look, Sarah, we're family. We should be able to speak honestly with each other. Bob's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being the head of the household. Danny is 22 years old. Most men his age are starting careers, getting married, building lives. He's still dependent on you for everything. Linda set down her wine glass with more force than necessary. Bob's right. We've all walked on eggshells around this for years, but it's not helping anyone. Danny needs a wake-up call. He needs people who believe in him. Sarah shot back, her teacher's instincts flaring. He needs family who see his potential instead of his limitations. Michael exchanged a look with Jessica, the kind of telepathic communication that came from years of shared eye rolls at family gatherings. Aunt Sarah, with all due respect, what potential? Danny checks books in and out at a library. He's never had a girlfriend, never lived on his own, never even driven a car. Sarah felt tears of frustration prickling her eyes. Every word they spoke was technically true, but they missed the essence of who Danny was entirely. They saw only what he couldn't do, never what he could. You know what I see when I look at Danny? Jessica chimed in, her voice taking on the measured tone of someone delivering a closing argument. I see someone who's given up. Someone who lets his mother fight his battles while he hides in the background. Danny had remained silent throughout the barrage, his hands folded in his lap, eyes focused on his barely touched dinner. But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had become carefully controlled. Bob leaned back in his chair, assuming the role of family patriarch dispensing hard truths. The boy will never amount to anything if he doesn't face reality. Sarah, you've enabled him his whole life. Look where it's gotten him. Linda nodded, her medical training making her voice sound clinical and final. Sometimes the kindest thing is the hardest thing. We've given up hope that Danny will ever be truly independent, and maybe it's time he accepts that too. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Given up hope. The phrase echoed in her mind, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, watching her siblings excel while she struggled, feeling the weight of their lowered expectations. Sarah stood so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. "That's it. We're leaving." But Danny's voice, soft but clear, stopped her in her tracks. "No, Mom. Please sit down." For the first time all evening, he looked up from his plate, his gaze moving slowly around the table, taking in each face with a strange, almost serene expression. "I want to say something first." The sudden stillness that fell over the table was so complete that Sarah could hear the pool filter humming in the background. Danny had spoken with a clarity and purpose that seemed to transform the very air around him. Even Bob, mid-gesture with his wine glass, froze as if time itself had paused. Danny reached into his shirt pocket with the same careful precision he brought to everything else, his movements deliberate and unhurried. When his hand emerged, it held an envelope. Not just any envelope, but crisp, heavy paper in pristine white, with what appeared to be an embossed seal in the corner. Sarah felt her heart skip. In 22 years of being Danny's mother, she had become expert at reading his moods, his needs, his carefully hidden emotions. But this was new. There was something in his posture, in the way he held that envelope, that spoke of a quiet confidence she'd never seen before. "I've been carrying this for 3 weeks," Danny said, his voice carrying easily across the suddenly silent porch. "I wanted to wait for the right moment. I thought tonight, with everyone here, would be perfect." Michael's eyebrows drew together in a skeptical frown. "What is it, Dan?" "Another library appreciation certificate." His tone held just enough mockery to make Patricia wince, but Danny's expression didn't change. "Not exactly." Jessica leaned forward slightly, her lawyer's curiosity clearly piqued despite herself. "Danny, what do you have there?" Sarah found herself holding her breath. She had no idea what her son was about to reveal, but something in his demeanor told her it was significant. This wasn't the Danny who mumbled responses and avoided eye contact. This was someone else entirely, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. "You know," Danny said, turning the envelope over in his hands, "everyone's been wondering about my plans. About my future. About what I'm going to amount to." He paused, his gaze moving slowly around the table. "I guess it's time I told you." Bob set down his wine glass with exaggerated care. "Danny, son, we're listening." Linda straightened in her chair, her surgeon's instincts clearly on alert. Something about Danny's tone, his body language, was setting off warning bells that she couldn't quite identify. "The thing is," Danny continued, his thumb tracing the edge of the envelope, "I've been working on something for the past 3 years. Something I haven't told anyone about. Not even Mom." Sarah's breath caught. 3 years? What had Danny been doing for 3 years that she didn't know about? Danny's eyes found hers across the table, and for the first time all evening, he smiled. It was a real smile, warm and somehow apologetic and proud all at once. "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. Until it was official." He held up the envelope. "This arrived last Monday." The silence stretched so long that Sarah wondered if she'd stopped breathing. Around the table, expressions ranged from skeptical to confused to increasingly interested. Even Michael had set down his phone, giving Danny his full attention for perhaps the first time in years. Danny's fingers found the edge of the envelope's flap. "I guess I should probably open it." Danny's fingers worked the envelope flap with the same methodical care he brought to everything else, but Sarah caught the slight tremor in his hands. Whatever was in that envelope, it meant everything to him. The paper made a soft tearing sound as he opened it, and the entire family seemed to lean forward as one. Danny pulled out not just a letter, but several pages of what looked like official documents. The letterhead was clearly visible even from across the table, and Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. MIT. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology. "Danny," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He looked at her first, his expression soft with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Then he turned back to the family and began to read, his voice steady and clear. "Dear Mr. Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the PhD program in computer science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with a specialization in artificial intelligence and machine learning." The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, incomprehensible and impossible. Sarah felt as if she was watching the scene from outside her body, unable to process what she was hearing. Danny continued reading. "Based on your groundbreaking research submission and exceptional performance on our assessment examinations, we are also pleased to offer you a full fellowship, including tuition remission and a teaching assistantship with an annual stipend of $45,000. Michael's fork clattered against his plate. Jessica's mouth had fallen open in a way that would have horrified her corporate image consultants. Bob looked as if someone had just told him the laws of physics had been repealed. But Danny wasn't finished. "The committee was particularly impressed by your novel algorithm for optimizing information retrieval systems, which has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Computer Science Research." Linda's hand flew to her chest. "Danny, is this real?" Danny's smile was answer enough, but he nodded anyway. "I start in September. I've already been assigned to work with Dr. Elena Vasquez on her machine learning project, the one that's been featured in Tech Review 3 times this year." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't remember when she'd started crying. "Honey, when did you? Remember all those times you drove me to the library?" Danny asked, his voice gentle. "I wasn't just checking out books, Mom. I was teaching myself programming. The head librarian, Mrs. Chin, she let me use the computers after hours. She has a nephew who works at Google, and he started mentoring me online about 2 years ago." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the uncomfortable pause of a family struggling for conversation. This was the stunned quiet of people trying to reorganize everything they thought they knew about the world. Bob's voice came out as a croak. "MIT? You're going to MIT." Danny nodded, carefully folding the letter back into its envelope. "Full ride. They're even paying me." The questions came in a rush once the initial shock wore off. How had this happened? When had he applied? Why hadn't he told anyone? Danny answered each one with patient detail, painting a picture of a secret life that none of them had imagined possible. "It started with a problem at the library," he explained, his hands animated now in a way they never were during normal conversation. "The computer system was old, really inefficient. Patrons were having to wait forever to find books, especially when they only remembered partial titles or authors. Mrs. Chin was frustrated because the budget couldn't cover a new system." Sarah found herself staring at her son as if seeing him for the first time. "So you fixed it?" "I built a better one," Danny said simply. "From scratch. It uses machine learning to predict what people are actually looking for, even when their search terms are incomplete or wrong. It reduced average search time by 78% and increased patron satisfaction scores by 60%. Michael shook his head slowly. "Danny, I'm studying economics at Harvard, and I barely understand what you just said." Jessica had pulled out her phone and was typing rapidly. "I'm looking up this journal you mentioned. The Journal of Computer Science Research. Danny, this is a big deal. Like a really big deal. The algorithm I developed at the library caught the attention of some researchers at University of Iowa," Danny continued. "They helped me refine it and suggested I submit it to MIT as part of my application. That was 8 months ago." Linda's medical mind was clearly trying to process the timeline. 8 months? You've known for 8 months that you might go to MIT. I knew there was a chance. But I didn't want to say anything until it was certain. You know how I am with changes. I needed to be sure." Sarah's heart broke and swelled simultaneously. She thought about all the family dinners where Danny had been dismissed, all the conversations about his future that had happened around him rather than with him, all the times she'd had to watch him absorb their low expectations in silence. The teaching assistantship covers machine learning fundamentals, Danny added. Basically, I'll be helping teach graduate students while I work on my own research. Bob ran a hand through his graying hair, looking completely lost. Danny, we had no idea you were even interested in computers. I've been interested in computers since I was 12, Danny said matter-of-factly. Remember when you gave me that old laptop for Christmas? The one that barely worked? I took it apart, figured out what was wrong with it, fixed it, and then started learning how to code. Patricia spoke for the first time since the revelation, her voice small. You never said anything. Danny's expression softened. Would anyone have listened? Even tonight, before I showed you this letter, what were we talking about? Vocational training. Food service jobs. You'd already decided what I was capable of. The truth of his words settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Sarah looked around at her family and saw the dawning realization in their faces. They hadn't just underestimated Danny, they had created an entire narrative about his life that existed completely separate from reality. The silence stretched long enough for a slight breeze to rustle the perfectly manicured hedges surrounding Bob's patio. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Sarah had never heard before. Danny, Bob's legendary confidence cracked, revealing something raw underneath. I owe you an apology. An enormous apology. Sarah watched her successful, alpha male brother struggle with words, saw the genuine remorse creeping across his features. All these years, we thought we were protecting you by keeping our expectations realistic. But we weren't protecting you. We were protecting ourselves from having to admit we didn't understand you. Linda's hands, so steady in the operating room, trembled as she reached for her water glass. I'm a doctor, Danny. I'm supposed to see people's potential, their capacity to heal and grow. But I looked at you and saw only limitations. Tears gathered in her eyes. I saw a diagnosis instead of a person. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Mascara be damned. I'm so proud of you, Danny. And I'm so ashamed of how we've treated you. Michael had gone very quiet, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. When he finally looked up from his plate, his face was flushed with something that might have been shame. Danny, I've been a complete ass. All those comments about your job, about living at home. I was just trying to make myself feel better about my own insecurities. Jessica nodded vigorously. We all were. It's like we needed someone to look down on so we could feel better about our own achievements. But yours, Danny, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. You did it on your own, without any of the advantages we had. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scene unfolding before her. After years of watching her family treat Danny as lesser than, seeing them genuinely grapple with their misconceptions was both heartbreaking and healing. Danny listened to it all with the same calm attention he brought to everything else. When the apologies had run their course, he spoke quietly but clearly. I'm not angry with any of you. I understand why you saw me the way you did. You understand? Bob's voice cracked slightly. You were scared, Danny said simply. When someone is different, it's easier to assume they can't do things than to figure out how they might do them differently. I've known I was different my whole life. I've just been working on being different in my own way. Linda leaned forward, her doctor's curiosity overriding her emotion. Danny, how did you handle all the pressure? The family expectations, the doubts. How did you keep going? Danny glanced at his mother, and Sarah saw a lifetime of shared understanding pass between them. I had someone who always believed I could do more than everyone else thought possible, even when I didn't believe it myself. Sarah couldn't stop the tears then. All those years of advocating for Danny in schools, of defending his potential to family members, of encouraging his interests when others saw them as obsessions rather than passions. She had never known if she was helping or hurting him with her fierce protection. Besides, Danny added with a slight smile, the library was the perfect place to hide. Nobody expects much from the quiet kid who spends all his time with books. It gave me freedom to work without everyone watching and judging. Bob stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the tile. For a moment, Sarah thought he might be angry again, but instead he walked around the table and pulled Danny into what might have been the first real hug they'd shared in years. "I'm proud of you, son," he whispered, his voice thick. "And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it." 3 months later, Sarah stood in the parking lot of Danny's new apartment complex in Cambridge, Massachusetts, watching an entire family work together to carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Bob, despite his bad back, insisted on handling the heavy computer equipment. Linda had driven up from Iowa with a car full of medical supplies and homemade meals frozen in carefully labeled containers. Michael and Jessica had coordinated their schedules to help with the move, treating it like a major family event. Danny's apartment was small but perfect for him, a quiet corner unit with huge windows and built-in bookshelves. Patricia had insisted on buying him a proper desk, while Linda had stocked his bathroom with enough first aid supplies to run a small clinic. Michael had created a spreadsheet of the best restaurants near campus, and Jessica had given him a crash course in navigating Boston's legal system should he ever need it. "You know you don't have to mother me anymore, right?" Danny said to Sarah as she arranged cleaning supplies under his kitchen sink for the 3rd time. She stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans, and really looked at her son. Somewhere between Iowa and Massachusetts, between the library and MIT, between the boy who couldn't make eye contact and the young man who would be teaching graduate students in a week, Danny had become exactly who he was meant to be. "I know," she said softly. "I just like taking care of you." "I like it too," he admitted. "But I also like knowing I don't need it anymore." From the living room came the sound of Bob trying to explain to Michael why the router needed to be positioned just so, while Linda critiqued their cable management technique. Patricia had found the one box Danny had marked fragile and was unwrapping what appeared to be a small collection of computer components with the care usually reserved for archaeological artifacts. "They're trying so hard," Danny observed, watching his family work. "They're trying to make up for lost time," Sarah agreed. "Are you okay with that?" Danny considered the question in his careful way. "I think so. It's nice to feel like they see me now. Really see me." Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, her usually perfect hair escaping from its ponytail and a smudge of dust on her cheek. "Danny, your advisor called. He wants to schedule a meeting for tomorrow to go over your research proposal." "Dr. Vasquez?" Danny's face lit up. "Already. The machine learning project is ahead of schedule apparently. They want to get you integrated with the team as soon as possible." Sarah felt that familiar swell of pride that had become such a constant companion since the reunion. Danny wasn't just attending MIT, he was already making an impression. As the afternoon wore on, the family gradually began to say their goodbyes. There were promises to call, plans for visits, and a standing invitation for Danny to come home whenever he wanted. But Sarah could see in everyone's faces that they understood this wasn't really goodbye. It was hello to a new chapter where Danny was no longer the family member they worried about, but the one they were learning from. Bob was the last to leave, lingering in the doorway as if there was something more he needed to say. Finally, he clasped Danny's shoulder with both hands. "You know what I realized today?" he said. "All these years, we thought you needed us to succeed. Turns out we needed you to succeed to remember what family really means." After everyone had gone, Sarah and Danny sat on his new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the quiet hum of a life beginning. Through the window, the lights of MIT's campus twinkled in the distance like promises waiting to be kept. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked. Danny thought about it, his head tilted in that familiar way. "A little, but mostly I'm excited. For the first time in my life, I get to be around people who think like I do, who see problems the way I see them." "And you're sure you're ready for all of this? Living on your own, teaching, the pressure of graduate school." Danny smiled, and Sarah saw in that smile not just her son, but the man he had become. "Mom, I've been ready for this my whole life. I just had to wait for everyone else to catch up." As Sarah drove back to Iowa the next morning, she thought about how many times over the years she had worried about Danny's future, wondered if she had done enough, if she had pushed too hard or not hard enough. But watching him walk into his new life with quiet confidence, she realized she had done the most important thing any parent could do. She had believed in him when no one else would, including sometimes when he couldn't believe in himself. 6 months later, when Danny's research was featured on the cover of Tech Weekly under the headline, "The Quiet Revolution: How One Student is Changing AI," the first person he called wasn't his advisor or his mentor. It was his mom. And when the caller ID showed MIT, Sarah's heart still skipped a beat, not with worry anymore, but with joy. Because sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. Sometimes the people everyone overlooks are the ones who change the world. And sometimes family dinners end with letters that remind us that we never really know the full story of someone's life until they choose to share it with us. Danny had spent years letting his family see only what they expected to see, while quietly becoming more than any of them had ever imagined possible. In the end, he hadn't just earned a place at MIT. He had taught his family that the most profound successes often happen in silence, nurtured by those who love us enough to believe in possibilities that others can't see. The boy who had once been dismissed as having no future was now helping to build it, one algorithm at a time, proving that different doesn't mean less than. It just means different. And sometimes, different is exactly what the world needs.